It's loading to go on Facebook Live, and I think we should be live now.
Okay, thank you, Jalissa. Jalissa, thank you for all of your support. You're doing a superb job, and really appreciate it.
Yes. Thank you.
No problem, my pleasure.
This technology, this new age, have thrust us into a new space, and you're managing it very well. So thank you, Jalissa. And let me welcome each of you to our executive committee meeting. Thank each of you for all that you're doing as it relates to your leadership and your service that you're providing as the people of our community, the people of our government. We make the government. We are a component of the government. So thank you to each co-chair. Thank you for your hard work. Our work, we're on a launch pad, and I want to thank each of you for getting your shuttle ready to launch, and you're launching. And we're going to have successful launches because you're steering this ship. So thank each of you for putting us on the launch pad and starting the work that needs to be done for the subcommittees. We have had, I know at least one subcommittee meeting that I attended, and it was superb. Jim, he's not here. Oh, and Jim and William, Commissioner Thomas and Commissioner Moses, I did get a chance to sit in on your committee meeting. Great job, and it launched really well. So thank you for, and I can tell this is great, and I'm going to give you compliments here. You were prepared and you were ready to take on the task. So I haven't attended any others yet. I will be attending, but I wanted to just acknowledge that they've launched and they did a great job at the launch with support from Mr. Chapman as it relates to procurement and contracting. So that's all I wanted to say this evening, and I'm going to turn it over to Leslie, but just know that if you need me, just make sure you reach out to me, email, cell phone, yell out the window. I'm always listening for you. All right. Thank you. Leslie?
Thank you. So Jalissa, if I do share screen, I can drive?
Yes.
All right, so let's try this.
If not, I got you. There you go.
I know you do, Jalissa. You're wonderful. It's nice to know you've got me. So what I wanted to do was to take us through, let me just get all of my screens together, y'all. Take us through, there you go. I lost you for a second, I'm sorry. Take us through a little bit of workshopping tonight, kind of where we are and where we want to go in the process. And so here's our agenda. We're a little bit behind. That's just the way this thing goes. But welcome and check in. And we thank Chairman Funny for his welcome. A little bit of update from the subcommittees. So we figured we'd do a popcorn and just hear where you are and what you're thinking. You know, it's not a deep report as anything. We met, we didn't meet, you know, but just to hear from you. A little bit of talk about data, and that would be the workshopping where we'll do some work together. Then just open and general discussion. I do want to share with you the team norms that were that we developed or drafted from our last conversation, but just really open forum. And then get out of here and let you get on with your evening. Does that sound okay for folks? Can give me a thumbs up. You good with that? Okay, stop and please let me know if there's anything else you want to add to on into the agenda. So we had our welcome. So just want to start with an icebreaker and figure out what color you are this evening. So I can tell you, this will give us some guidance too as your facilitators, because if we get a whole lot of purple or red, then it's going to be a really short meeting. But depending on the other colors we get, we can see just where we are. So just want to check in around, and you know, there's a whole psychology around color and color psychology and what it means and so forth that companies and everyone use. But we just want to do our own little check-in easily. So if you could write in the chat, and I'm going to ask my my Christus Lab colleagues to just help me monitor the chat. For some reason, it's not coming up. But what color are you right now? What are you feeling? And you can give the large or the very specifics if you can.
Commissioner Thomas says dark to mid green.
Oh,
Commissioner
Lord.
Funny said lighter green.
Okay.
We have another light green from Commissioner Moses. Orange from Commissioner Russell. Orangish yellow from Commissioner Pasquale. Commissioner Thomas wanted to clarify that his answer was admiration and not terror.
Oh, that green. Okay.
I was getting concerned there.
Me too. I was thinking that might be an offline conversation too.
Commissioner Wright said light blue. And Commissioner Arif said he thinks yellow. He's on his phone, so he's having trouble reading the slides, but he's feeling optimistic.
Okay. Okay.
And
So
Christian said admiration.
Oh, I love it. Oh my gosh. So we're a little short on time, but I love the sphere we're in with the yellows and greens, even into blues. Those are the ones that if we weren't feeling in those spheres, then something's wrong, right? Because we do anticipate work. We do anticipate, apprehension and figuring things out. We do, though, also want to be open and accepting with that. So that feels good. Like I said, the red and the purple would have scared me a little bit, but these other colors are feeling pretty cool. So I'm gonna go ahead and move on. I really am, if I can. Okay. So I wanted to just begin with some 2-minute updates from each of the subcommittee chairs about how the past 2 weeks have gone. Any pluses or challenges, if you have a meeting schedule, whatever it is that you would want your colleague and the rest of this team to know about your experience thus far. And I just picked these randomly, but why don't we start with our vision, mission, and charter review subcommittee?
So, Tiffany, you want me to get started?
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm just, so 2 minutes each or 2 minutes the whole committee for
Well, I
the
was thinking
subcommittee?
the whole committee. I was thinking you could
Okay.
share it.
Okay, sure. So I'm gonna get started and then I'll let her speak. So, so Tiffany and I have met twice, the two of us already, and we met yesterday with Christian and Kim. We had a very productive conversation, but we met when Tiffany and I first met, I think it was last week. Our first meeting, we wanted to know more about each other. She brings in, she's an administrator at an Episcopal school in Brookhaven. So her school has recently undergone this process of the mission and vision, and for years now they've been doing this. So she brings all this very helpful experience and view from what it takes to look at the mission and vision. And so that's going to be incredibly helpful for this process. So I was very happy to hear that. We had a really interesting conversation yesterday with Kim and Christian, talking about we want to look at what does the founding fathers or founding members of the city look like? Who are the founding members? How was the city founded? How was it incorporated? What were the circumstances around the founding and the creation of the city in 2012? Who was involved? Who was not involved? So we're trying to get, Christian is connecting us to some of those people. We're looking also at the charter, as the principal governing document of the city. Christian suggested that we look at, implicit bias in the charter. What's there that may be a barrier to somebody entering, for the city council. So we're going to be looking at the charter with very critical eyes from a mission and vision perspective and from a bias perspective. So I'll just go there and then Tiffany, you can go ahead and continue so I don't take too much time.
Yeah, I think that was perfect. We decided that we would meet with our commission on April 1st with our first meeting of our subgroup, that is. And we're formulating our agenda. And we just want to give Jalissa another shout out because she's gotten all of our Zoom links, and we owe her an agenda so that it can be put on record. But we're really excited about meeting with our committee, and we've already got an agenda going, so we're excited about that. Getting to know more about our subcommittee members, and doing some kind of team building and kind of talking about what a mission is and what a vision statement is, and looking at the current mission for Brookhaven and doing some activities around that. So that's going to be April 1st.
I love it. Thank you. That is exciting.
Mhm.
That is very exciting. That's great. And you guys are a little different, right? Because you're visioning, right? It's all
Yes.
of those things. So that's really exciting. Thank you for that. And thanks for having that meeting set. I know that could not have been easy to find a good date. All right, recruitment and hiring. So I know that Tawana, there's William.
Yeah, can y'all hear me okay?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good. Yeah, Tawana wasn't able to join us tonight due to work conflict, but she and I have met several times over the telephone and video chats like this so far. We also had a meeting earlier this week with Brookhaven Human Resources, Rick and Helena. Got some good information there. Helena also forwarded us some additional documentation and some data that we're now trying to get through. We're working with other subcommittee members trying to get a good date that works for at least most of everybody where we can get together. We're hoping that's going to be next week, but that is still in the works. One of the main things that we've done is Tawana and I have gone through the employee, essentially the employee handbook or the employee policy guide. We know that is set to be reviewed and updated later this year. So that's one of the places we plan on focusing to see if there's issues, changes of language that we may be able to give recommendations and help out with.
Great. And taking advantage of that update this year is perfect timing, right? So that's
Exactly.
That's perfect. Wonderful. Procurement and contracting, what you been up to?
So I guess I'll go ahead and give a briefing, and Commissioner Moses, feel free to jump in if I'm missing anything. Yeah, we were able to meet this past Tuesday. I also got a chance to meet with Commissioner Moses last week, and we really got some great feedback from Steve Chapman, who is the Assistant City Manager and Chief Financial Officer. He gave us some great data points, a list of all the city's contracts from 2020, and also the city's procurement policy, which was really helpful to get a chance to review and at least get a base knowledge of where we can go from there in terms of what equity looks like as it relates to procurement and contracting. And so that's kind of what our meeting on Tuesday centered around with the entire subcommittee. And then there were some great ideas that came out of Tuesday's meeting. So one of the ideas that came out of the meeting was potentially hosting workshops with local business owners, making sure that any bids from the city is written in plain English and Spanish and any other language to make sure that it excludes jargon and that is easily understood by the citizens, and just making sure that everyone kind of has a base knowledge level in order to at least put themselves in a position to earn one of those contracts. So I think that was a great starting point for us, is just talking about access and how the city can potentially improve that access.
Thank you so much. And I add my commendation to Chairman Funnies. It was a great meeting. And you're going to see a little bit as we do the workshop where I've pulled some of those things up for us to talk about too, because it really was great and laying a good foundation with everyone participating. So thank you.
I would like to add one more thing too. Jalissa was marvelous. I've worked with other groups before, and I've never had minutes for the meeting that quick. And I have never had them so thorough that we were able to both agree, yeah, this is perfect, and have them already sent out to our members of our group for their review so that we can get a consensus that everybody agrees with it so that we can have them posted. She is phenomenal. Thank you.
I love it. So one of the commission's recommendations might be 10 more Julissas, right? If it ever could be done.
I don't think Brookhaven could afford 10 more Julissas, but we could try.
Okay, and then we've got police use of force. Who wants to start us there?
I'm here. I think I
Oh,
saw
go
Short.
ahead.
And I saw,
Are you here as well?
Yes, I am.
I see everybody. Oh, there you go, co-chair. So immediately after our last meeting, Short and I, well, immediately after the last executive committee meeting, Short and I met and we just talked about kind of how we were going to move forward with the committee, what we were thinking about. And so we talked about kind of polling our committee members to see what interests them in this committee, to either have them drafted to our committee or that they volunteered and picked this one specifically. And we sent out communication to each one of them with a few questions on it. And they have, I think almost all of them have responded. And so we're still looking at that. And then he and I met, and after that, we talked about meeting with our staff liaison and reached out to her, and she was immediately available. And so we've since met with her, and we had, who joined us, Ashra, from...
I think it was
yeah, I was there.
Leslie.
And
Leslie, and oh, I know
Mindy.
Leslie was there, and Mindy was there as well. So we had our first meeting with her where she was phenomenal. I mean, she obviously had been prepped for, this time and knew that it was coming, because she had information for us and talked to us about how, we can get additional data and call it down or decipher it more. And she has people in place that be able to get us additional information. So we had some conversations and talked about even some initial reports that we would like to see about maybe by beat, figuring out the call outs by area of Brookhaven, because we've already identified that different populations are kind of isolated in different areas of town. So wanting to see that, and she's going to get that for us. That's Major, what is it, Harold Jones or Jones Harold?
yeah, that's her person.
Yeah.
Yeah, so she was awesome to work with, and she invited our committee to do the use of force training, and we talked about that. And so we're certainly going to offer that to the committee and see if we can either get, a couple of times we were really clear about what the COVID protocols were and whether, it was something that we could offer and folks could be comfortable coming in if they're, comfortable leaving the house at all at this time. And she assured us that, they have really been good at keeping the social distance aspect of that, because they have to do those same trainings for other partners. And so they've been doing a really good job with it. So we're really excited. The plan is really for Shorrock and I to go through the information and get our first committee meeting on the schedule and invite the committee to do the use of force training, and then get to work, start, going through the data and seeing if we can find a specific area we want to call down. That's all I have. Shorrock, do you want to add anything?
No, I think you covered everything, Monique. That was great.
Okay. Leslie, did I miss anything?
no, it was amazing. And remember, it's committee and consultants that get to do the simulation. I can't wait to try.
Oh, and consultants.
Yes, yes.
You're coming too. So we
Yes.
are really excited about that.
No, it is. And it reminds me, a couple of things you guys said as we, as we get ready to go to the next section. A couple of things. One, if there aren't any experiences in these spheres that can be offered to subcommittee meetings, I think that's great. So everyone may not have a simulation on use of force. That sounds kind of cool, at least to me. But is there a way to go through and simulate the hiring process, to actually fill out an application and to see what that's like, and to work through that. Is there some way in procurement to do that? It just reminds me that to the degree that we can have those experiences of the work that we're trying to do, it just gives us a different perspective. And I don't know, I think our staff liaisons who are amazing could help us figure that out. The other thing that just comes to mind from our example with in hiring is that it might be interesting to just find out what is up for review this year. Where are there opportunities, right? That we have the ability to provide input on some standing city process or schedule or something, because that could be a real unique kind of vantage point as well. Just knowing that we're not going to get every recommendation we need this first time. So if we could just be smart and get some of those that have the best, opportunity for timing and otherwise to move forward, then I think we'll feel good about that. So thank you for those. Okay, so just want to remind us we're in grounding and data now in March and April. But that's because we like to put things in box and put months around them. Clearly, a part of data gathering is going to happen when we talk to stakeholders, right? So data gathering and analysis and all of this will stretch throughout the time. It's not distinct, but now it is, I think, that grounding where we at least want to figure out where we are and kind of how we're going to approach the work.
Hey, Leslie,
yes, sir.
can you go back to the data one, please? I'm sorry, your previous slide, this one. I just wanted to emphasize the importance of making certain that the co-chairs that you ask for data beyond what they may present to you, that's very key. Close your ears, Kristen. We have to make sure, because I'm going to come back and question you with regards to specific items for each of the areas. But I think you're going to have to push the envelope with city staff to get some data because that's so important. And I'll give you an example from Commissioner Moses and Commissioner Thomas's meeting. We received 1 year of contracts. Well, I'm an engineer. I need to be able to graph statistics so I can look at a trend. So I asked him to provide at least 3 years of data so that the contracting and procurement group can look at the trend versus just one point on a graph. So I'm gonna be listening, and I may ask some drilling questions specific to the data for each of you to make sure that we're getting enough data from the city. Okay, thank you, Leslie.
No.
John, if I could add to that, the city has retention schedules that are principally driven by the state. Due to a variety of reasons, we don't keep anything longer than we legally have to. So a good chunk of stuff is 3 years. After that, it's gone. Some things are 5 years, and then some things we have to keep forever. So when we say we only have 3 years worth, we literally only have 3 years worth. It just depends on the data you're looking for.
Got you. Thank you.
Love it. So again, data point, why do we want to do this? Want to understand, what is the data that demonstrates the impact of the policies, and then what are the policies themselves? So I found some cute little quotes that I thought were kind of cute, that to just get us started and give us a chuckle. Torture the data and it will confess to anything, right? Because we know that data is data and it's important, but data ain't necessarily truth, right? Or even fact, it is data. And so just recognizing that we're getting this, but it's so much more than getting just the data. So the first piece around figuring out which data to get is really around asking the right question, like developing the key questions that give you the direction that you want to go in and influence the way that you develop your recommendations, and helping you then figure out what data it is you want to request. If you think of data, it's just really like a flashlight that moves you in the right direction and continuously provides you with more clarification of the direction you want to move in. But this ask the right question starts off with where do you want to move? So for example, in contracting and procurement, the questions we want to ask are, what is our vision of equitable contracting and procurement in the city of Brookhaven? And let me share with you what they said the other night. This isn't everything, but basically what they said. Their vision of equitable contracting and procurement is that businesses have an accessible knowledge base for how to work with the city, that there's a level playing field for large and small and diverse businesses, and that there is more minority business participation in the city's contracting process. So if that's their vision, their key questions, right? Then it begins to tease out. So what's the data I need to find out to get there? What do I need to ask for? What do I need to know? What do I need to understand? What is the current outreach? How is information provided? Who accesses that information? What is the span and size of businesses participating? Is it all in certain fields or in other, in certain kinds of jobs or other jobs? But we've got the question, that's what we're shooting for. And then it begins to tell us what data we want. So I want to do a little bit of group sharing here and see if we could brainstorm for a minute around our other 3 subcommittees. So if I were to ask you all, what is your vision for equitable recruitment and hiring in the city of Brookhaven? Just this group. Clearly we're going out to the subcommittee and getting theirs, but what kinds of things would you respond to that? A vision of equitable recruitment and hiring in the city of Brookhaven.
Well, I guess
Oh.
you did it again, Monique.
Yeah.
You can go.
Nope, your turn.
Okay. I was going to say to start, generally, I think, if you look at organizational behavior, people tend to hire people who are like them in a variety of ways, who think like them, who act like them, whatever it is. So I guess the first thing would be, how are we making sure that we're recruiting in a way that we're getting diverse candidates into the pool so that when we make hiring decisions, we have diversity to work off of rather than, maybe only getting a certain segment.
And I would
Your
only
turn,
add
Monique.
that, and I would add that, yeah, the recruiting in places where you would be likely to get the diverse candidates. We're always talking about HBCUs and the many ones we have here for looking at collegiate level, or just making sure you're advertising in a way in all languages. And if you're going to go up Buford Highway and leaving flyers for different opportunities and the businesses there, but in languages of those businesses, just being accessible. And then also creating work environments. I mean, I know we talk about hiring, but you also have to talk about retention and making sure you're creating work environments that those individuals want to continue to work in, and that's available for them as well, because getting folks in the door is only half of the battle. So I think that's important.
Any other just top of mind thoughts about what equitable hiring and recruitment would look like in your vision of equitable hiring and recruitment in Brookhaven? So if I was real good at technology, I'd be able to key this while you're watching it and, come up. But even if we were to just stop there, we talked about a recruitment and outreach process, that partners with, diverse groups and ensures a good pool so that the pool is there. So equity would look like a good pool of diverse and equitable candidates, right? Diversity that's accessible, who is doing the outreach and how people are able to become engaged. A healthy work environment in which we are able to retain diverse employees. So it begins to tease out, well, what were the questions that you would ask to get there? about where we do recruit, about who is staying and being retained in jobs, about what jobs people are being retained in and what jobs they aren't being retained in, and what ethnicity they are, right? And so you begin to, again, once you set this vision, we're going to look at this, the questions begin to fall out a little bit from that. All right, we'll do it again. So just popcorn and brainstorm. What is our vision for equitable use of force by the Brookhaven Police Department? What, and I added a little bit to this one, but what relationship, right? Because use of force is one tool of many, but what relationship do we want the Brookhaven Police Department to have with residents? What's your thinking on that?
So I'll start, or at least somewhat answer the second question there. I feel like if police has a good relationship with the citizens that it protects, then you see people for people. You value their lives. You are you're less apt to escalate toward up that ladder of whatever that use of force policy is, if you're able to see people for people that you know, people that you interact with, people that you protect on a daily basis, as opposed to not interacting with the community and you just kind of see them as, this is my job. So those are some of the first thoughts that come to mind.
And if I might add a point, I think that we want the relationship with the PD to be something where our young men and women don't have to run every time they see a police car. They know that, you know, what they're doing is what they're supposed to be doing, where they're at and such. And the police no longer are the threat. The police are who we turn to when we need assistance within the community for a problem, not somebody that we have to be afraid of all the time. And, you know, I have a unique perspective on that because, you know, my son is Panamanian birth and I'm US. My son has a completely different complexion than I do. So we have had to have the talk about, okay, if you're stopped by the police, what do you do? We've had those conversations. He understands that, you know, we do look different, even though we share the same last name, but we do get a different response when we see a police officer. So I think everybody should try to develop a relationship where we don't see the police as someone to fear. That's just my 2 cents.
I also think that maybe it will involve looking at whether the members of the police force ethnically and racially reflect the demographics of the city to some extent. You know, if the city is X% Hispanic or Black, is that represented in the police force?
And since this is our committee, we talked about like trying not to shorthand our committee to use of force committee, just because it is policing and the use of force, and they're kind of 2 different things. And I felt like if we're even talking with our liaison with the police department, if we're coming at it from you know, we're here to look at your use of force policies, it's almost like condemning or being combative about issues that are present of mind because of the news, because of the environment, because of the realities that we're facing as a people. So there's policing that doesn't necessarily rise to the level of use of force that still is worth examining. Is just those relationships that, you know, Jim was talking about when he first started, was just the relationships and making sure that the way they're policing, even if use of force isn't involved, but whether if that's equitable and if that's garnering trust in the community.
Yeah, one thing I found interesting from our meeting with Major Harrell is that there's not much room for negotiation in terms of what use of force continuum looks like, right? She was pretty clear in terms of what the guidance was, and that continuum wasn't really an option. But I think to Monique's point, the equity isn't just in the use of force, right? I think it was in one of the early commission meetings, one of the commissioners had gone through, I don't know how many of the transparency reports that the Brookhaven PD had published, and said something like some large majority of the traffic violations were Latin American residents, right? And it's like, and specifically in the Buford Highway corridor, and and there's definitely people speeding on Windsor Parkway and things like that. So I think a lot of it, in my opinion, is agreeing with Monique, is really looking at the data overall, looking at what the interactions of police with citizens look like, right? And then what are the outcomes of those, right? Who's getting warnings, who's getting arrested, who, are the crimes the same? And we're seeing different outcomes of those crimes for different types of people, and really looking at what the equity at that level looks like, not just on the use of force level.
I think that's really great. I mean, it's part of why I couldn't even just stop with that one question, because it absolutely is just one manifestation of it. I mean, you've talked about, Alex talked about less use of force, but also about, police in relationship with community, right? And reflecting community, and so those then are the questions that that drive what kind of data we want to look at, and the data that we analyze and then begin to frame. Thank you guys for that. And then also one that's a little different is the equity, right? So around the equity one, I suggested this sentence, which is, what values do you want to reflect in the Brookhaven vision and mission, right? Because that's words, and that's about aspiration, right? So when you just think about that, when you think about equity values, what would be some of those that you would want to see represented? Once you have that included, and then when you look at what Brookhaven has, 80% of them may be there already. But first, starting with the question around, what does equity look like to me in terms of an aspiration, right? And trying to figure that out. So I would just ask you, just popcorn, what values might you want the vision and mission to reflect when you think about equity? What would you want to see in it?
Well, it's funny because we've sort of framed the question another way. We were sort of looking at, the city has a vision, they have a mission, but they do not have like a set of values. Other organizations or corporations or cities or nonprofits, along with the mission and vision, they do have a set of values or principles that are reflected in the mission and vision. And Brookhaven, as Christian mentioned in our meeting yesterday, does not have that. So the question we were looking at was, do we come up with a list of values that are generated from the vision and mission? So we sort of asked it in a different way. And also, I think when we look at mission and vision, the way to look at it through equity, there's another way, when the mission and vision was written, who was at the table writing the mission and vision, and what was the process in which this mission and vision was approved? Was it a resolution? Was it agreed on by the city council in a retreat, or was it did a resolution formalize this? Was there, any formal process, validating that this was the mission and vision? So who was at the table? Who was creating the mission and vision of this new city? And so we sort of look at it from that. We haven't really yet looked at it from what equity values we want, the mission and vision to reflect, and more like what values will come from the mission and vision, and more like who decide, was it an equitable process?
Yeah.
How we got to this mission and vision.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. I love it. But in each of these, y'all are so good. I mean, y'all are on it. And in each of these, where we began is, what is it that we want to know? And then once we begin to move through that, here's another one. Data will talk to you if you're willing to listen. So then you move to the data. So I wanted to share a little bit about all these different data points and just kind of framing how to think about that. And of course, would love to share the PowerPoint with you. But we got the community data, which we got early in, that was January. Who lives here, where people live, you know, school scores, all of that census people data in a particular place. That came from Mike Carnathan. Then you get the program of the city data. That's what we're soliciting now. What's happening, who you serve, who applies, and you know what the results of it. For example, how many were hired or received contracts and all. We get that from our staff. And then you get the best practice and field data. What's happening in other cities and efforts that are tackling these issues. And that comes from staff. Oh, I should have definitely put Valerie on here. I'm sorry, Valerie, we'll update that with Kettering because we get a lot from them. And it comes from Chrysalis Lab and Kettering around what is the world doing as thinking about this. There's a lot of smart people out there. So you've got that data. And then we've got our quantitative data, of course, and which is hard counts and percentages, and qualitative, which is real talk with real people. And so after you've got that key question, you begin to zero in on where are we going to work? What's the disparity or points that we want to move through? And then to begin to talk to people to understand why things are happening, right? Why things are not looking in the outcomes the way we want them to look, to begin to form our recommendations. If we have data, let's look at data. If all we have are opinions, let's go with mine. And by the way, what happened with Netscape? But anyway, I thought that was funny, but the good news is we have data. We have so much data. So we don't have to go this route, but it doesn't forgo the point that data isn't enough. Because the next thing is to form a story from the data, right? Look at what you see. Oh, I'm totally making this up, but I'm seeing that, you know, that Brookhaven hires representative to the amount of, relative to the population in its city. But when I look at turnovers, I'm seeing particularly in this one job or job description, it happens 3 times as much, and that happens to be Hispanic males. What is going on there? Right. So you just begin to have to, and that's the story you present. It's, you know, you don't want to leave someone with just here are data points, but what's the question that comes out of that and the story that you're trying to look for to get an answer for. So getting the questions, getting the data, but then forming it to look at, okay, what then is the story that we're looking for, so that you can help people when we do our stakeholder engagement, that they're able to understand it, because they have not spent months like we have digging into all of this data and looking at it and thinking about it so much. And then this last one I loved with Crazy Looking Einstein, but you know, not everything that counts can be counted, and not everything that can be counted counts. We cannot solve our problems with the same thinking we used when we created them. Mm-hmm. And so then the fourth is this stage that we're going to get to, which is developing recommendations. And we'll get here, of course, in the future. We'll be meeting every month. But the equity-driven decision-making approach is a little different from what has been traditionally been used. So it is data and data-informed methods, but it's also lived experience that counts just as much as any expertise, any college education, any particular certification. It is lived experience. What's it feel like? What is the why that this data has gotten here? Explicit about what it's trying to do. I'm trying to figure out why Hispanic men are leaving the city at twice the rate than other people. Again, I'm making this up totally, but you understand, you're trying to figure out and very explicitly figure out how to close a gap. That's the work of equity. And then transparency and accountability, asking the questions, sharing the answers, asking them again, and just making sure that is very visible. One thing I would caution us too, when we make recommendations for the city, we've also, I think, got to be really cognizant that whatever recommendations that are made are going to impact the city, right? And that's a real part of the story, you know? So human resources, budget, other services. If we are suggesting, I don't know, more hiring, 10 more Jalissas, right? Then that money has to come from somewhere. So I think that we've got to do our jobs in terms of giving people the whole choice, right? The whole dynamic, so that they can begin to make the trade-offs and the choices that, and ask for those choices, and City Hall can recognize that that was a part of it. So that comes a little later, but I think we have to keep that in mind. We're also gonna be asking, what's the impact of that on the city? What's the city paying now, and what's the impact, and keeping that in our minds. So that, I'm gonna stop there just around the data. I think that given the time, we're not gonna be, these daggone norms will not go away. Here's what I'm gonna ask you about the norms, and that is read them, tell me if you like them, try them with your groups. But we do feel like they reflect much of what we said before, but I'd rather not go over that now and take our last, looks like 8 minutes, and just really open the floor to what you heard from one another and what you'd like to happen in these meetings, right? And where we can be, Chrysalis Lab, city, and what can be helpful to you in what you need or want to do next.
One area, Leslie and team, I think that we also want to remember doing the analysis of the recommendation is being able to capture the benefits of the different recommendations, just like you're thinking about the costs. I think it's important that we think about the benefits of the recommendations also. All right.
One of the things, who was it when you shared and gave you an update and you said you already had your agenda for the meeting coming up? Which group was that? Can't remember. The vision. So I wonder, would it be helpful for you all to share with one another your agendas, right? Because we're going to meet once a month, but a lot happens in a month, So would it be helpful to share your progress on a real time and your agendas and what you're getting out of? Just think about how we can be a team and support to one another.
I think it'd be helpful for everyone to kind of share with each other how they're running the meetings, how good the engagement is, and at some level, how deep are some of the subcommittee members willing to go in versus wanting some of the stuff handed to them, like the data analysis and things like that, right? Like, what does participation look like and how to foster the participation? I think all of that could be really useful.
Where did we get on finding like a repository for our communications or like this information opposed to, emails and just sharing a bunch of emails? Because I was thinking, while it would be nice to know what everybody's agenda is, I just don't know that I want 5 more emails, an extra one a week from a different committee that we're, not necessarily on. If we're going to meet once a month to talk about like our best practices, I would hope that these meetings, once we're kind of underway, we are talking about our progress and best practices in a way that we can pick up some of those best practices from our fellow other committee chairs and maybe say, oh, wow, they're really rocking and rolling over there. They got a whole agenda done. Sure, we need to get our game together. We don't have one. But that's something that I would also be perfectly fine waiting until, this meeting for that. And it would be buried in my email, because he's already seen that he has to email me and then text me to tell me that he's emailing. It's so horrible. Yeah, so I don't know.
Well, thank you for the reminder on that. I know that came up at the last meeting. I gotta be honest with you, we haven't followed through with it. I know the IT staff has looked at it. I think Julissa even sent a recommendation to me probably 2 weeks ago now, and I haven't really followed up on it, but we'll have an answer before.
She should have texted you to remind you that she emailed you. See what I'm saying?
So we're gonna have a collaboration tool.
That'll be great. Thank you.
And Kristen, I sent you an email also. I'll follow up with you on that one as well.
Very good.
Yeah, we definitely want to make sure everyone has all the tools that you need. Please pull on us when you need the tools, and we're here to support in any way we can.
I can tell also from the little bit of the data I've been able to go through thus far, we're going to definitely have some crossover, I know, with our subcommittee and the policing subcommittee. That is one of the largest employers in the city, is the police department. It's also one that I've looking at the data already that has been made available, one of the ones with the highest turnover. So there's, with the entire hiring policy, recruiting, all of that, I think we could definitely have some crossover on ideas and collaborate and help each other out on that.
Maybe even a crossover committee meeting, which would be, cool to get maybe something off of our one less meeting or something would be cool.
That would work for me too.
We've got just a couple of minutes. Any other thoughts or concerns you want to put on the table? As my daddy would say, God bless his soul, all hearts and minds clear.
I was thinking, Monique, your idea about the crossover meeting, the opportunity to invite at least the chairs from other committees to work with. I'm guessing with the Mission and Vision Committee, subcommittee, getting input on some early thinking as they think through how to incorporate DEIR principles in the governing documents, making sure that they've captured some of the initial concepts and thoughts that are coming out of your subcommittee might be valuable. So that idea of cross-pollination and thinking through that as an executive committee might be really valuable.
And I'll make just one observation when we talk about data, is when you get it, when you look at data in an industry that you're not familiar with, you're going to need to compare it to some of our peers, if you will. So if you were to look at, say, police retention, in your all's line of work, that may seem like a lot of turnover, but for police departments in general, we have an excellent retention rate. So as you get data across all these different program areas you're looking at, think of it in the terms of not only your experiences and your industries, but also what other cities and counties will be experiencing the same type of issue. In many cases, we may be the worst or the best compared to our quote peers in the big scheme of things.
I like the idea, Monique. Thank you for your discussion about working together. And Valerie, I listened to all of your presentation. Co-production, I think that's a great thing because something that one group may be doing may influence the output of another group. So I love that idea. I think that's a great idea for you all to look for opportunities to co-produce. See, Valerie, I paid attention.
I love it.
Paying
Thank
attention. Okay, now, John, what are tell me what committees co-chairs are on. John wants us to quiz him.
We have everybody except Tawana.
All right, yeah. I'm going to ask you tomorrow.
Leslie, I did want to share a thought that the co-chairs may want to think about. It might be helpful if there was a kind of a floor that everyone was building from, so that there was a continuity then when you put together the reports. And so what I'm suggesting is, and it's clearly not just a suggestion, if we're talking about, for example, social equity, well, how would that be defined so that there's a standard definition across committees? How would it be operationalized? And so each of the committees would be looking at operationalizing it for management decisions. So what does it look like in Department A, B, and C? And then how you measure the success for the purposes of evaluation and benchmarking. How do you know if you achieved your goal? And so that would, some performance indicators, because social equity can be measured and understood in so many different ways. And without a basic definition that everyone has agreed to, you might have apples and oranges and not know it until the staff then try to implement something and there's not clarity on what it is. And then lastly, some performance measures for social equity would include procedural fairness, and that's where the hiring and the promotions and the awarding of contracts comes in. So that when you put the different subcommittee reports together, that could be the topical area. Distributional equity, where you're talking about access and targeted intervention. Process equity, the level of service delivery provided, and then outcome disparities. Why in some neighborhoods our policies impacted differently than others. So just some food for thought as you think about down the line, how do you put this desperate work together and be able to make sense of it? So thank you.
No, that's great. And I think that's something to consider, because I've been in my head trying to figure out in this period of time, the work of this committee. The work of this commission is to get that community engagement and frame these recommendations. But there is no question that these recommendations have to get meat on the bone, that that the city has to come in and decide the how and the what and the where of it, and how that transitions and what's done in advance of that. I think it's something we'll have to wrestle with. We know clearly our job is to get as much grounded community engagement and make the smartest recommendations as possible. But again, that bridge and that transition is over the next few months. I think we'll have to determine that clearly. Again, because recommendations, we can make them now, mom and apple pie. We got to know where they can go and what they can do. But if they approved, but we have to figure that out. And that's been in my head almost every night. I think about y'all every night. How about that? And that's one of the things that keeps me up. So thank you for that. All right, guys, it's 8:03. I don't want to shut down without any other comments. How folks feeling? Are you feeling yellow, orange, green, maybe a little bit? Back to our color wheel, which is enthusiastic, maybe a little apprehensive, hopeful, anticipatory. Yes, I'm looking for head nods. Okay. All right. Well, I think we are good. We still do need our meeting dates for subcommittee meetings, so please continue to work hard on that. Thank you, Vision and Mission, for setting that down. And hopefully those are happening in the next couple of weeks. We're here should you need to reach out, and we will then, of course, see you next time officially on April 15th, I believe, at our next full commission meeting, if not before. And we will be joining each of your subcommittees. Stephen's going to join the procurement and contracting. Kim's on the vision and mission. I'm going to be doing hiring, and Mindy, we're going to just audit and listen and hear and be helpful as possible. So you'll see us around as well. All right. Well, thank you very much for your time this evening. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for your commitment to Brookhaven and to the process. And you all have a wonderful evening.
Thanks,
Take
everyone.
care. Have a good night.
You too.
Good
Bye-bye.
night.
Have a good night.
All right. Bye-bye.